Welcome to the center of it all. It's officially fall here in Centre County, and that's a busy time of year. This week, I take a look at a group that is working to improve town and gown relations. Mel is making a delicious Sicilian pizza, and I got the inside scoop on the NHL's newest mascot. All that and more coming up. Guys, if you've been on social media at all this past week, then you're probably familiar with the orange monster who broke the internet. But did you know the man who created Gritty is from Bellefonte, PA?
So I've been a freelancer full-time since 2012. Before that, I worked for a motorcycle graphics company and then Jostens, the book publisher here in town. And I quit in 2012 to do this independently. And now my wife works with me as a marketer. And we just work with small businesses and large businesses of all kinds around the world, really. So from each month, each year, we really have no idea what we're going to be working on. It's kind of a surprise, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Brian has designed t-shirts, album covers, ice cream containers, and much more. He has worked with companies such as Harley-Davidson and Hard Rock Cafe. But it was his work that he did with Chick-fil-A that got him noticed by the Philadelphia hockey team. In mid-July, he got an email from the art director from the Flyers saying they wanted him to design their mascot.
It was amazing. I call these my run up the stairs moments, because I always run up the stairs to tell Alicia, my wife, she works upstairs.
The Flyers gave him 4 different parameters he had to follow, one being they wanted to see a monster that was similar to the Philly Fanatic.
Then I came up with a list of maybe 40 different other options, different animals and whatnot. And we went through each one and crossed some out because, maybe this other NHL team already uses it. Or maybe, for instance, there was a Yeti we considered. Maybe the Yeti isn't the right way to go for, reason X, Y, or Z. Once I had that list compiled, I drew 25 different sketches, and each one was just a wildly different take on the mascot. They called me and gave me feedback on which one they wanted to go with, and they picked one that really looked a lot like Gritty does now. So once we had him as the foundation, then I went in and redrew him, cleaned up the line art, and we went back and forth over a week with adding different mouths, different expressions. He had wings at one point. Then we had, as soon as you put wings on him, you got to try, does he have bird wings? Does he have insect wings? It's like branches of a tree that just keep growing.
Brian did a lot of research before designing Gritty and looked at all the other different NHL teams and their mascots.
I wanted to be inspired by them, but I also wanted to make sure that the Gritty was completely different too. That being said, we did want, the art directors did want Gritty to kind of be in the same universe as the Fanatic, because 2 Philly mascots, and they needed, they might appear together. They need to look like they're from the same family, sort of.
Like many of you, I was curious to know exactly what Gritty is supposed to be.
What is he? That's a great question. You think I would, if anybody knows, it should be me. He is supposed to be a monster. I guess we were kind of thinking like a Jim Henson Sesame Street monster, because the point behind Gritty was to try to attract kids and try to attract the next generation of hockey players. We needed him to be friendly in that regard, but they also needed him to be very movable. And I think that's one reason they went with the mouth that's more like a puppet mouth rather than a rigid mask, because and the googly eyes, which are also controversial, which is surprising to me. I like the googly eyes, but they wanted stuff like that animated really easily, so you can see a lot of motion, especially if you're in the nosebleeds. You can still see emotion on the guy's face. We're walking such a fine line because we wanted it kids are going to have to interact with this, right? But you're walking such a fine line, because if you make it too cute and cuddly, that's not Philadelphia, you know. So it's hockey, you know. So it needs to be tough. It needs to be a little rough around the edges too.
When Gritty first came out, Brian said he wasn't expecting a lot of pushback, but now he realizes he probably should have.
Whenever a new mascot is released or a new sports logo, like it's always a big controversy, and I completely understand it, because you're taking something that people have invested so much time into and love into, and you're flipping it around on that.
Creating Gritty was a team effort that involved Brian's designs and art directors and costume creators.
Everybody involved with this, especially the art direction team, like love the Flyers. You know, they did this for the Flyers. So if you disagree with that, the outcome, that's completely fine, of course. But like, let's talk about, well, what would have made a better mascot? You know, what would you change?
He believes that fans' opinions are super important, and if they have concerns, he wants to hear them.
I've never been connected to something that generated a meme, you know, ever. That's pretty nuts. And I saw even there was a beer that just came out that was called Nightmare Fuel, you know, and I don't know the artist that did the artwork, but it's funny because the way he drew it reminds me of a lot of my artwork. So it's almost like, the way I thought of it was, if the tables were turned, somebody might have called me to say, hey, I want to make a Nightmare Fuel beer label and draw him like this, and I might have, you know, I might have taken that job. So I think there are some memes that go maybe a little too far, but you know, that's what the internet is for, is testing those limits. But it's pretty wild. There's a lot of positive memes coming out too, which, you know, keep going, you know, keep fighting the meme war.
Gritty was the first of his designs that he was able to see come to life and take on its own personality.
It was amazing. I have done lots of mascots, but this is the first one that ever became like a physical thing, you know, because it's usually just on t-shirts or on letterhead and stuff. So I just got an email one morning from the art director, and he was like, here's what we have so far, and it was the costume just sitting on a table, and it felt great. I just sincerely hope, and I think this will happen, but I think over time, the fans, once they get to know Gritty, and once Gritty evolves to meet the fans' needs too, that they'll grow to love him, and they're going to be sticking up for him when he starts getting in, you know, rival fights with other mascots, I hope.
Brian hasn't met his creation yet, but the Flyers did give him and his family tickets to a game later this month. Coming up next, we'll be looking at a community downtown and the ways that they're helping young adults live more creative and positive lives.